Hey, welcome to Books and Brew. I'm your host, Andrew Huff. I'm a novelist, screenwriter, director, all around media producer. And this show is about sitting down with fellow authors and getting to know their writing process so I can steal their secrets for my own success. Now, here's the thing I know about writers is when we write, we love to have a beverage with us. And that usually comes in the form of coffee and or tea. So while we get to know these authors, get to know about their books and what it takes to be a writer, I get to try their favorite writing brew right along with them. So let's meet today's guest and find out what I am going to be drinking. Jason C. Joyner is a physician's assistant, a writer, a Jesus lover, and a Star Wars geek. He's traveled from the jungles of Thailand to the cities of Australia and the Bavarian Alps of Germany. He lives in Idaho with his lovely wife, 3 boys, and daughter, managing the chaos of sports and superheroes in his home. His debut book, Launch, is an award-winning YA superhero novel and the first book in the Rise of the Anointed series, which just concluded with the release of book 3 on October 2nd. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We haven't discussed this, but I am a rather large Star Wars geek myself. And so I did consider having us square off in a Star Wars trivia contest. Now, I don't know if you find this experience, but sometimes like when I see an ad pop up and it's like, oh, click here, hardest Star Wars trivia you've ever like encountered. Like it's always questions. I'm like, these are not hard questions.
I got burned with the premiere of The Force Awakens. We went to it and we went early, so we're sitting there for a while. And I have a friend and he's a local news anchor. And so he was the host for the thing and he was running a Star Wars trivia. So my family was like, you got to go down. And so I go down in the front, before the movie starting and they're doing this trivia. And he's like, oh, Jason, you're a Star Wars geek like me. So I'm going to give you, what's the call sign of Darth Vader's ship in Return of the Jedi? And I'm like, it was, it's just this tiny bit of knowledge when they're, when they're in Endor, when they're Endor, the ship where they have to, get approval to go through the shield. And it's that's such a tiny piece. That was a hard question. I got burned. I'm like, he set me up like Jason's so knowledgeable. And I'm like, duh. Yeah,
that's like digging super deep. And what's funny is I just watched Return of the Jedi with my boys a couple nights ago. And honestly, I don't think I even can remember the call sign of
there you go.
So
deep dive.
I can remember the call sign of the stormtrooper that is pulled into the Millennium Falcon. TK-421 is pulled into the Millennium Falcon and knocked out so that Han and Luke can steal their costumes. And he's not reporting back from his post. So just to show like what I can recall off the top of my head. So
exactly.
I'm super excited to have you on the show. I'm super excited to jump into all these topics. But first, introduce what your favorite writing brew is.
I'm just a general black tea guy. I spent time in Australia and learned to enjoy a good cuppa, as they said. So I drink a lot of just black teas, but my go-to is in Twinings Irish breakfast tea. It's just a nice strong tea to get me going. I rotate between some different teas through the day, but usually if I'm reaching for one, that's my favorite go-to right now.
Nice. Okay, so Twinings Irish breakfast. I've got it ready to go. I've got it ready to steep for about 5 minutes. And that is your timer to pitch us your books. Tell us why we need to rush out today and buy all 3 books in the Rise of the Anointed series.
Awesome. Well, in the Bible, Samson had great strength and Elijah outran a chariot. Nowadays, we would call those superpowers. And so that was kind of the thought that sparked me to write this young adult Christian superhero series. And I thought, what if God had to give these kind of powers to teens today to fight a growing evil? So they're set in Silicon Valley, San Francisco area. And the first book, Launch, is about 4 teens who are invited to this influencer conference called the Launch Conference. And it's hosted by Simon Mazer, the youngest tech billionaire, who's looking for kids with more than just good Instagram skills to help him with his idea to influence the world. And the 4 teens, DeMarcus, Lily, Harry, and Sarah Jane, they don't know each other. They're brought together and they find that strange things have been happening. DeMarcus can outrun cars on the highway, and lights have been behaving strange around Lily. and they're brought into this, but there's a mysterious old custodian named John who says, hey, your gifts are given to you for a reason. And so there's a confrontation, of course. And then in Fractures, the 14s have become friends and they're learning how to use their abilities. And John is now working to disciple them. But they want to be superheroes. They want to be out patrolling the streets and doing all the cool things you see. And he's like, no, you need to learn to listen to the Lord and walk in his timing. And all of a sudden they get confronted with other superpowered teams. Like, where did these kids come from? If we're the anointed ones, then these kids must be corrupted. But there's more deeper mystery working behind the scenes, ends up in a big confrontation. I like to call Fractures my Empire Strikes Back, because because, and you'll know why if you read it. And then book 3, Anointed,
a character's hand gets cut off. No,
this is a spoiler-free zone. Yeah. And then Anointed just released, and it's the wrap up of the trilogy. And now the 14s have to, they're confronted with this evil that's growing and getting stronger by the minute. And something is happening in San Francisco where people are getting overcome with rage and anger and acting out. And before it can spread across the world, they have to learn how to use their gifts in unity and in harmony to stop what's coming or succumb to it as well. So that's the Rise of the Anointed series.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I love superhero books. I love superhero stories. Grew up on comic books, all that kind of stuff. And my kids love them too. So I think that's such a cool thing to be doing right now, especially just in our culture and how much superheroes are kind of a big deal. And we'll jump into this in just a minute, just in terms of mythology and like even sometimes how these stories from the Bible inspired even cultural mythologies around the world and everything, which could be a fun conversation. But kind of in the last couple minutes we have here, because you definitely did a great job pitching us your books in time. I have a question for you before we get to the first tea tasting, and that is DC or Marvel?
I'm gonna fudge and say DC in comic books, Marvel in the movies.
Okay, all right.
So I love them both. I love them both, and some of the DC movies are awesome, but they're more hit and miss for me. Mm-hmm. And I just really enjoyed the Marvel Cinematic Universe and what they're doing. Awesome. So yeah, that's kind of where I land right now.
Okay, all right. Hey, that's fair. So yeah, people definitely need to go check out Rise of the Anointed series. And do you have also in our last maybe 60 seconds any new series on the horizon? Any spin-offs or anything you can talk about?
So I've got this Havoc t-shirt on. Havoc is a flash fiction website where you can read short stories they do 1,000 words or less, and you can read daily stories there. They've got an anthology coming out here in the next month, and I'm one of the featured authors. And so I've got a short story set in a sci-fi universe that may be the beginning of something new for me. So you may want to check that out soon. And they're going to have lots of great authors. And one of my best writing buds, JJ Johnson, is the other featured author. So awesome. Check out that Havoc anthology. It's called Prismatic because all the themes were based off of color in this go round.
That's awesome. Yeah, so we're going to let you know how to get in touch with Jason later on in the show. And I'm sure you're going to have information about that when it comes out. And we're going to be looking forward to that. Okay, so we have our tea. We hit our timer. It's been steeping. It's already smells good. I definitely have not been a tea drinker up until more recently. And but I'm being won over by a lot of the teas that I'm drinking. So and just so everyone is aware, and I probably should have asked you in advance, I very much enjoy just drinking coffee and teas without adding anything into them. So I don't know if you add things into them, which is totally fine. But because I'm not drinking it the way you drink it. Do you drink it black, or do you add some?
No, I have to add some sugar. I have the sweet tooth, and so I have to sweeten it up a little bit.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna go straight. We're gonna find out what this is like. All natural, as they believe the French say. So,
okay.
All right. Also, Jason knows I'm a suspense author, so I don't review the tea until later, and I give you nothing to go on in terms of what I think about it. So here we go. I forgot to do a loud slurp too. I don't know if you heard that, but
not really. There we go.
There we go. All right.
Yeah, in Australia they like to put milk in tea a lot, and I know they do in England too. But so I'd have to tell people, don't make my tea white. I don't want that in there.
Nice. All right. So I've got my tea. I want to find out how to be successful like Jason C. Joyner. And so let's talk a little bit about about mythology, essentially, because I'm sure for you, as you go into writing a novel, I'll give you an example from my writing, right? Like I can basically jump into a novel, and a lot of the research that I end up doing is more related to, maybe the world that my spies inhabit or something like that. What kind of technology, what are they, if they're in the middle of a mission, what are the terms they're using, that type of stuff, right? Which is sort of accessible because it's real world. But when you're crafting a sci-fi or even say like a fantasy or a superhero world, you don't want to just be like, oh, and now all of a sudden they have powers. Like you want to dive deeper into that. And so talk a little bit about your process of building the mythology around your story or around stories.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk mythology, there's there's so much to that, and you can talk about how the world came to be and why it is. The Greek gods, they told their stories to explain. The Apollos rode the sun across the sky, and that's why the sun passed over. And so it's having a reason for it. And so, like with my superhero series, I talked about, I was thinking about what to write. My first book was actually suspense, and I remember when we met in ACFW, the American Christian Fiction Writers Conference, we were both suspense writers, and then I moved into the superhero, and I was thinking of, well, there's cool things like my main character DeMarcus. He runs super fast, but he would burn out his shoes. He'd run the rubber off, and so he had to work like multiple mail routes just to earn enough money to keep himself in shoes. So fun little details. That's like, well, where does it come from? And there's a verse, and I can't believe I'm going to blank on it. I think it's in 1 Corinthians, but I could be wrong. The gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. And, I believe God gives us gifts for a reason. And you have charismatic leaders that are given a gift of leadership and that charisma and that natural ability, but they have to choose what they're going to do with it. If you're going to, lead an uprising against the government, or if you're going to be a leader that helps better your people, that's a gift you get to choose. So that was kind of the key hook for my series was, we're all given gifts. What are we going to do with it? And so in this case, like I said, for my describing my series, when you look at the Bible, there's so many of these stories that you can go superpowers, Samson's great strength, Philip, he teleported in Book of Acts, and, water was stopped in when they crossed the Jordan and the Red Sea. And so there was just all these things where I could kind of tie back to and say, oh, here are things that would be superpowers. And so that's what I looked at for this series, and how I kind of got inspiration for more powers as I went along.
What I love is you mentioned, you brought up the Greek mythology, right? There's this real world thing that someone is building a mythology around to explain, because especially maybe even at that time, it seems there's things that seem rather fantastical, and what I love about that, or what it's kind of makes me think, is there is a similarity to what I do in terms of my novels, because what I love doing is finding real world examples of things. And so it just looking into just news stories, maybe that sometimes get overlooked, or maybe a story that someone that is little known, to be inspired by, and go, man, that's cool. Like, I want to take an element of that and I want to build that into my story. And I think, at least for me, I get a little intimidated by the idea of building a mythology, or at least of crafting a world, like a fantasy or a superhero or a sci-fi, especially. But what I think is interesting about it is, you know, uh, there's a way in which you can take familiar things, but craft them in such a way that it kind of brings out a little bit of a uniqueness to it, whether it's a character or a story, or, for instance, the things we see in the Bible and read in the Bible and go, hey, that sounds like a superpower. I mean, that's that connection. I think that sometimes is intimidating for people, or at least for writers, especially, to think about the well to go to, rather than, well, I'm just going to watch a bunch of sci-fi movies and then take from here and take from there. And,
Yeah.
rather than do that, it's like, no, be inspired by life and by the things that are true and things that have happened. And what's fun about being about the Christian worldview is a little bit of the realization, or the sort of opening up of that other world that exists, that interacts with the physical world in ways that defy what we typically expect, the ways to the world to work. So anyway, already, like, I'm ready to go write my own superhero novel right now. I'm like, hey, I got Jason's secret.
There you go.
I got his tea and I got his secret.
You've foiled again, Well, and you hit upon it with, makes, when you're talking about finding those real world things, that's kind of where I go with my next series is going to be a science fiction series. And but I love powers. I love to kind of kind of say, okay, what's bigger than us ourselves? We all kind of dream of what could we do. So this one's set in the future, and there's those particle accelerator labs that they have. The one in was it Switzerland, the Large Hadron Collider.
Yeah.
And so in the premise of my book is they have one of those that actually blows up, because people have talked about these doomsday scenarios. Every time they launch, it's like, oh, it could cause a singularity, and it's like,
right.
Well, it does blow up, and because it blows up in Europe, it damages it. There's a chain reaction in one in the US, and so there's this. It really devastates the planet for a while, but because of that, they learn the secret of how to do interstellar travel. But then over time, certain people start developing physics-based powers. So here I'm trying to keep it, okay, it's got to be something with, everything's physics, and if you argue with a physics student, but you try to, there's people that can do certain things, and all has to be tied to that. And, so there's a limit with the energy they can do and how long they can do it. It gives you some limitations, and it's just kind of like, okay, let's play with this now. And, what's, and it kind of creates a hierarchy that some things are more common, and then there's somebody that's rare. And what if they need that person that's rare to do something? And there you go. There's my basis for my sci-fi series I'm working on.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was also going to say, when it comes to those worlds and combining these real world things and going, what if, or even thinking futuristic, or even thinking other galaxy. And I'll use Star Wars as an example. I think one of the ways in which Star Wars kind of stands out often from potentially other sci-fi properties in terms of its accessibility is despite being in a different galaxy, there are just common themes and characters and jobs, right? Yeah. Like, and everything feels real world, and yet it's set on another, in another galaxy, and there's planets we don't know, and there's species we don't know, and yet I think, and I'm obviously thinking a lot of like the original 3 movies, just where there are the common things that we can connect to, like one's a farmer, one's a princess, and one's a smuggler. Like it boils down into those sort of identifiable characteristics or identifiable themes and characters and traits.
Archetypes.
And
Yeah.
archetypes. Yeah. And so it's fun to think about, like, I love the idea of that, of like building out that world and thinking about the what if to a bigger degree than me, in terms of the suspense novels that I do, where I'm like, the what if scenarios are a little bit more like, I say grounded. It's more like, not that what you're writing isn't grounded. It's more like, stuff that we're kind of already faced with or already seeing, and it's not a little bit more, you're kind of going a little bit more fantastical, but grounding it in that same, like you're saying, like, there's discussions about what would happen if this, if this magic we're playing with suddenly like goes wrong.
Yeah. Your books, you're using technology and you just, it's kind of like, just a little bit beyond James Bond, just a little more, there's just a little bit more that extrapolating a little bit more, but it's definitely stuff that could happen and to play with. And there's a lot of things you can do. And like you said, mine goes up, the superhero series mostly is grounded. I mean, I had fun kind of having a tech genius in book 2 kind of act as that armorer role for the teens to kind of help power up a little bit and do some new cool things. And then I just got to play with, okay, DeMarcus is fast. And so what if he gets these shoes that can create a field that makes water into a non-Newtonian fluid? Mythbusters, they walk on the cornstarch and water mix and they can, as long as you're moving, you can walk on it. And so that's like, well, it emits a little field that makes it do that. So, you see the Flash run on water and DeMarcus isn't quite that fast, but well, is that really going to happen? No, I mean, that'd be cool to have shoes that do that kind of thing, but I doubt that's reality. But hey, I'll take a little Mythbusters here and a little, Elijah running the chariot here and having fun with it. So I think you got to have fun with your writing and your stories. If you're not enjoying it, then how are your readers? So you take those inspirations and you don't have to be, I don't know. I mean, some things have to be pretty realistic, but other things you can just say, okay, just take it a little bit more and then have fun with it and see what you can do. And then if you go full on fantasy and sci-fi, you can, then you can go all out. But
you brought up a secret that actually is one of my secrets, and I think it's worth us sharing with other writers, is how often I try to see if Mythbusters has tried something that I'm wanting to do. And for me, if it's plausible, it's going in the book.
There you go. I like it.
Often they're plausible, but highly unlikely. I'm like, it's still plausible. It's going in.
There's nothing new under the sun. The wise man said in Ecclesiastes. And then there's a book, Steal Like an Artist. I don't know if you've read that. And it's just a small little book. And it basically says, look, the stories have been told. I mean, all of the different, we mentioned archetypes. I mean, the major stories have been told, from Greek mythology to, Native American stories to, modern day novels. I mean, you can always look at something and go, oh man, like when the Flash TV series came out, they had a character that was like giving everybody code names. And I'm like, well, I had that in my book, but so you say, okay, you just have to say everybody's going to have something and it's your spin on it though. You're putting things together in a unique way. So I came up with it at the same time as the Flash TV series, but I did it my own way. And, for a minute I thought, I can't do that because they did it. And, no, I can do that. And so Steal Like an Artist talks about, you can get inspiration from different things. And we all steal. We all take ideas from Mythbusters or other books we've read, inspiration from, hey, I want this chapter to feel like Indiana Jones and I love Star Wars. So let's have that kind of, what can we do with that? But you're putting it together in a unique way. So writers, creators, content creators need to realize it's you, it's all these influences plus you makes it unique. And then you can really you do something with it and don't be afraid. I mean, you don't want to obviously copy and just be, hey, this is Twilight, but with, with something else instead of, it's going to be mummies instead of vampires, you got to have enough originality, but or enough mixing that it's not a blatant ripoff.
Well, and like you said, I think maybe sometimes people forget to add themselves into the equation because they, may just copy from all these different sources and then put something together and then just get it out there versus putting it in, mixing it up, and then adding themselves into the mix of, because that's ultimately, and you probably would say this too, the books that I wrote for me. Like, yes, I was inspired by a lot of things. There's scenes in my books that you would go, oh, that scene feels a lot like this thing that I remember from this James Bond movie, or something like that. But ultimately, when I'm writing it, I don't have that scene as much in my mind as much as I'm like, what would I like to watch? Like, what would I like to see? Like, am I excited by this? And, and then is there an idea that comes in that gets mixed into it that takes it in a different direction that I get excited about? And I go, yeah, that's really cool. And then I just go with it. And I think the for a writer, I think you have to do that. And then hopefully there's a lot of other people who think it's cool too. Because I think if you try too hard to make it cool for other people, I think that's where you end up. Yeah. Or you make it exciting for other people, or you're like, what do other people want to see? I think that's where you end up potentially, running into being more of a copycat than there being a little bit of an original taste to it. So anyway.
No, I agree. Yeah. You don't want to be just straight out fan fiction, just copying something and, and inserting yourself or whatever. You got to bring that uniqueness to it, that personal feel and that you enjoy it. So if you're trying to chase after a formula, I mean, when I thinking through the sci-fi series, I've read some military sci-fi books, and it's like, okay, those are cool. Those aren't quite me. So I'm going to probably be more space opera than military sci-fi. Military sci-fi seems like it sticks a little more to rules and some different things with, how to do it. And it's like, yeah, which are cool. I mean, there's a series that, takes real care with talking about how you would fight a battle in space with relative distances and just all the, things you'd have to actually much more realistically and physics based. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm going to ape X-Wings and TIE fighters. I'm going to have starfighters that swoop around, even though that's not how it goes, but that's what I enjoy. And that's what I'm going to put in there.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what I want.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Well, Jason, I'm gonna review the tea. It's been great having you on. I think I have found that the best review I can give for a drink is if it's gone by the end of the interview, because that means I just kept going back to it and I wasn't even thinking about it. Our conversation was so engaging. Like, I'm just sitting here just like drinking it, And so anyway, I really liked it. I thought it was really good. And I will say this, that because I've tried some different black teas, and it must be the Irish breakfast part, like the Irish part. I don't know. Like it had a uniqueness to it. It had a unique flavor. I liked it, but it was different from other black teas. So I can see why it's a go-to for you. It was very robust, very hearty, and I liked it. Yeah,
there you go.
Very flavorful. Good job. There we go.
Glad you enjoyed it. So thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed getting to talk and reconnect. So
yeah, absolutely. So, hey, I have links for people to buy their own Twinnings tea, Irish breakfast tea, in the description of this video. But also, Jason, help us know how we can find you and where we need to go online to get to you, to buy your books, all that kind of stuff.
Great. Well, I'm Jason C. Joyner. It's Joyner, like joy. I've got joy in my heart, down in my heart. And so website's jasoncjoyner.com. I'm active on Twitter and Instagram at jasoncjoyner. On Facebook, I have a readers group called The Heroes Hangout. And so you can find me there, and we talk about geeky books and fun things. And sometimes I do some giveaways there. So
nice.
And sign up for my newsletter on my website. My website's a little wonky right now. That's what you get for trying to do it yourself. But all the way to the bottom, there's a newsletter link, and I give away a $10 Amazon gift card with every newsletter I send out. So you have a chance to win.
Oh, nice.
And I like engaging with readers, like talking to people about stories and superheroes and Star Wars and most of all, Jesus. So yeah.
Yes, that's awesome. You can find out more about my books at my author website, andrewhuffbooks.com. There's links to all my social platforms there. I'm pretty much on all of them. And if you like getting to know authors and hearing their writing process, and also watching me try different types of beverages, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and you'll be notified of when new episodes of Books and Brew come out. So would love to have you guys subscribe. Would love to have Jason back on for his sci-fi series. I think that would be really good. Although we may have to try a different, if you've got a different beverage, a different version of tea, maybe at that point, come up with a new favorite by that time, I think is what I'm trying to say. So
there you go. I'll get working on it.
Yeah. All right, Jason, thanks for joining me. Hopefully one day soon we can grab tea together in person. I would love that.
All right. Thanks again for having me.
Absolutely.